See, oh, let me see why give me
One of
the
most
Iran-Iraq
important wars of
map.
the last 50 years is one that we don't hear about much. When in 1980, two of the Middle East's most powerful countries,
This guy's
Iran
videos
and
are just
Iraq,
beautiful.
waged 8 years of some of the worst trench
Makes me
and
think I'm
chemical
watching a
warfare since
documentary.
World War I, leaving both countries devastated. This is the war that fractured the Middle East into lines that still play out in nearly every conflict there today. It set the US and Iraq on a path that ultimately led to the American invasion. And
You like documentaries?
Iran's often
fuck with some
hostile
documentaries.
relationship with the wider world.
I hated them in
This
school,
is the
but
Iran-Iraq War.
now I kind of depends on if it's something I like actually care about or not.
And Iran is in the middle of a revolution. The country is coming off of decades of being ruled by the Shah, a king that the US and UK had installed in the 50s after covertly overthrowing Iran's democratically elected leader. But after years of the Shah's corrupt autocratic rule, a mass uprising violently overthrows him, creating what becomes an Islamic republic.
Watch out, they spontaneously combust. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Cut that out, cut that out.
Of Shia religious scholars want to impose fundamentalist rule on the country and are hostile to both the Western powers and the neighboring Soviet Union.
God damn it.
They establish a military force called the Islamic
Revolutionary Guard, don't ban me, please.
Which is meant to protect their hold on the revolution and to suppress
I'm not
other
joking with
who
minors.
helped overthrow the Shah. The US is watching all of this in shock. Their biggest ally in the region and a major oil producer has just turned from...
Well, you know how America feels about that oil, boy. You better not fuck up our oil.
The biggest tremors of this revolution are felt in the rest of the Middle East. Iran sends out radio broadcasts to Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Kuwait, and Iraq, calling for people to rise up and overthrow their own rulers. They're trying to export their revolution to their neighbors, to gain new allies in the region. Neighboring leaders, most of them Sunni Muslim, don't...
How recent is this? It's pretty recent, no?
King fears being overthrown, just like the Shah was. And in Iraq, Saddam Hussein sees this Shia religious revolution on his eastern border and worries that the Shia majority that he rules over will rise up against him too. But he also sees this as an opportunity. Iran and Iraq have been fighting over this border territory for years. This waterway is a critical access point to the Persian Gulf, where both countries export their oil to the rest of the world.
This reminds me of Risk.
In a treaty between the two back in 1975, Saddam had to give up full control of this waterway, as well as access to oil-rich regions in what was now Iran. Saddam hates this treaty and is considering taking the waterway back by force. The Iranian revolution has left the country weak and fractured. Khomeini and his Revolutionary Guard are still fighting other political factions for control. The Iranian military, which used to be funded and trained by the United States, is now weak, its leaders having been jailed or executed after the revolution.
Damn.
Iran's military would normally be able to crush Iraq in an invasion, but
maybe
not anymore. Saddam sees this as an opportunity to weaken a major rival. Saddam is also riding on a delusion that he himself is going to unify the Arab world under his leadership. If he invades Iran, maybe the rest of the world will rally behind him against this new...
Because everybody knows, everyone over there likes to behave and, you know, get along with everyone.
He decides to prepare 10,000 Iraqi troops to cross the border to invade Iran. What's about to happen here isn't just the start of a new war. Saddam is kicking off a dynamic that will dominate the Middle East for more than 40 years.
I wonder how long it takes this guy to, like, make all these illustrations and everything.
The fight between revolutionary change and status quo power. Pausing the video to say thank you to today's sponsor, who is BetterHelp. If you're struggling with your mental health,
hang on, wait.
And
you might be spitting.
Therapy. BetterHelp is a platform.
Why is everybody getting sponsored by therapy? Literally every video I watch now has a therapy sponsor.
10,000 soldiers cross from
Basra
into southern Iran, Further north, Saddam opens a second front to seize strategically located border towns and put pressure on
People
his
be
enemies.
sad, yeah.
These air
God bless.
attacks mostly fail, and Iran responds with airstrikes of their own into Iraqi territory, hitting oil facilities. Iran still has sophisticated jets that the United States had given the previous regime. This gives them an edge.
Time is it for me? It's 11:11 p.m.
The war quickly sucks in the rest of the region. Israel is among the first. It wants to keep these two adversaries occupied,
Make a
fighting with
wish.
each other, keeping both sides
Yeah.
weak. So almost immediately, Israel secretly sells supplies and parts to Iran.
1111.
This helps the Iranian Air Force keep planes in the air. Now,
Okay.
Iran and Israel are not friends, but Israel sees Iraq as a greater threat here, so they're willing to support.
Bro, isn't Israel like
Iran needs to get its
small as hell?
military organized if they're going to fight this war. So they release military officers that they had jailed during the revolution. War tends to unify a nation. And in this case, the fractured country of Iran is unifying around Iraq's invasion, creating this irony that Saddam is the one who actually cements Khomeini's hold on power. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait also step in here, giving billions of dollars to fund Iraq's war efforts. They want to
Billions?
weaken Iran.
Yeah, I know
and
they
turn
had it
back
like
its
that.
revolution.
Shit.
The Middle East is now dividing between, on one side, Arab states who are ruled by aging Sunni monarchies and strongmen who fear change, and on the other side, a Shia Iran, bent on revolution, on remaking the region in its image. China is also watching this war. They say they will
good old
maintain strict
China.
neutrality, but they take the opportunity to sell weapons to both sides of the conflict. They eventually become
businessman.
Iran's top supplier of weapons.
Person,
For most
you
of
want guns? We
1981,
got
the
guns.
two armies are in a stalemate, with Iraq holding small but important stretches of border territory. The global powers see this stalemate and try to negotiate a ceasefire, hoping that this
Yeah, good luck
conflict
with
that threatens so much of the global oil supply will end soon. What they don't know is that this is really just the beginning. Saddam agrees to the ceasefire, but Khomeini does not. This war has become so useful to his goals, unifying the country and keeping the military occupied.
I mean,
so that it doesn't
from his
become a rival
perspective,
to his power.
true, I guess.
Khomeini needs the war to continue. So Iran demands that Saddam Hussein step down. They say the war will continue until
Step down,
his
what?
rule is ended. Saddam, of course,
Swing or be
refuses,
swung.
So
Okay.
Iran goes on the offensive. Their
It's for
forces are
YouTube?
now
Yeah, I'll probably put it on
organized.
YouTube.
Their officers have been freed from jail, and they're able to recapture the territory that Saddam had taken, even pushing into Iraq. Saddam's hopes of a quick victory and a gain of some valuable territory are now dead, so he turns to the United States for support, and the US agrees to help. They hope to weaken Iran and its call for anti-American Islamic revolution across the region.
That's a
The
mouthful.
US starts giving Saddam intelligence and satellite imagery on Iranian troop movement. Iraq also gets another big backer, the Soviet
Yo, they've
Union.
got
The
hacks,
Soviets
man.
are
They're
at war in
walling.
neighboring Afghanistan, trying to suppress another religious uprising.
Jesus
But they
Christ.
also have allies in this region. So over the course of the war, the Soviets become a top supplier of weapons to Iraq. Now
It's all
remember the
good.
situation between these two. It's a
God
tense
bless.
moment in the Cold War, and the United States and Soviet Union are suddenly supporting the same side of this Middle East conflict, both backing the country
I
that
mean,
supports
he's gonna
the
clap him,
status
no?
quo, nothing changing, allowing their great power struggle to continue as it has. But by the summer of 1982, Iran is now pushing into Iraqi territory. Much of their campaign focused on the city of Basra. If Iran can take Basra, it will cut off Iraq from the Persian Gulf, preventing them from shipping out their oil. Iraqi forces are outnumbered here, so they start to dig in and build trenches, erecting barbed wire barriers, planting landmines, and surrounding the
I need to
city
sleep
to
tonight, bro.
stop Iran from taking it. The fighting starts to resemble the brutal warfare of World War I, waves of artillery strikes, and the Iranian military
Jesus.
resorting to human wave attacks where thousands of boys and men charge over open fields, leading to huge numbers of casualties. Iran is not successful in taking the city,
Jesus.
but this attack
I've been
does
up on- yeah,
weaken
pretty much.
Saddam, showing that he's vulnerable.
Sometimes I just like I don't sleep
And
for a
this is where
night
we
just
need to
because
look
like
to the north to
I don't
talk
know.
about the
I still
Kurds.
feel the need to.
The Kurds are a minority group in the north of Iraq. They've been long suppressed by Saddam Hussein, and they see this moment as an opportunity to break away from Iraq to make their own country. So Kurdish forces start fighting with the Iraqi army, taking towns and villages. So now Saddam is fighting.
We all know how much the Kurds want to fight.
One of which
Those motherfuckers will fight anybody.
Iran starts sending support to
Interesting.
Kurds, who have a presence in this
probably a problem, no?
oil-rich part of Iraq. If the Kurds can hold it and keep Saddam's regime away from all
Yeah, I
of
have
this
insomnia
oil,
too.
it
Shit
would have
is
a major
fucking.
effect on this war.
It is
This is a
interesting.
big deal for Saddam,
Keeps your life
and
interesting.
he switches tactics to make sure he can control this northern area. He escalates by using chemical weapons against the Kurds as well as the Iranians. Shells filled with mustard gas. Weapons that
Okay,
cause
dude.
extreme burning
Isn't
and
mustard
blindness.
gas a
weapon
war
that is
crime?
illegal under international law. But even still, the global powers who are supporting him mostly look the
Nah,
other
mustard
way.
gas is
The U.S.
cooked.
starts sending technology and money to Saddam,
Nah, that's
even
fucked, bro.
restoring official diplomatic ties with Iraq. This allows Iraq to buy technology from the United States that helps them develop their weapons
Isn't mustard
program,
gas just
including
just
the
bleach
horrific
and
chemical
ammonia
and
or something like that?
biological weapons that he will soon be using on the battlefield. They need him to keep fighting because this war has changed. It went from
I was gonna say, I
protecting
think
Saddam
that people
from
like
revolution to now using
people like
Saddam
accidentally
to
make it in like
weaken
their
Iran,
bathtubs and shit.
so they keep supporting him.
Because like they
showing
mix
him that
cleaners
he
so
can
that they
use
don't
chemical
know.
weapons without being punished. The chemical attacks help push back Iranian
Yeah,
forces,
yeah.
and the war reaches a new stalemate.
Might be bleach. You know?
1984 is the year that the oil war begins in this
I'm gonna
conflict.
get put on the list for this.
Iraq starts
One,
attacking
two,
Iranian
eight.
oil tankers in the Persian Gulf, using new jets provided
Make
by
mustard.
France, a new
Mustard
entrant
gas.
to this conflict. Saddam warns that he'll also attack any ship going into Iranian ports.
Yeah, bleach and ammonia.
Iran retaliates by attacking oil tankers carrying Iraq's oil. The oil that the entire globe relies on is now at the center of this increasingly brutal
I'm spraying
conflict.
awareness because you know
Hundreds of
some people might
commercial
not know and they
ships
might
are
accidentally
attacked
kill
by both
themselves.
sides, resulting in the death of over 400 civilian sailors. The U.S. has to send in 2 frigates and a guided missile destroyer into the Persian Gulf to escort U.S. ships, hoping that their presence will stop these attacks. Meanwhile, Iran is making progress on
It
the
kills
ground,
you, yeah.
slowly taking
I
territory
mean, not
from
like
Iraq, and
maybe just like
continuing
breathe a little
attacks
bit
on
of
the
it, but
vital
you'll still
port
have to
city
like
of
go to the
Basra.
hospital. It just like
It's
it.
1985,
Yeah, it
and
pretty much just
Saddam is
cooks your
about to
lungs.
escalate to a new extreme.
But you didn't know
He
you could
starts
die
shooting
from it. What?
missiles and dropping bombs on Iranian
just like
cities
it just
all
like
over the
melts your
country,
lungs pretty much.
including the capital. This kills
Yeah, what?
16,000 people and leaves many homeless. Iran
Damn.
responds, striking Iraqi cities, firing these massive missiles primarily at the capital of Baghdad.
There's no way you thought it just made you sleep, bro. No
These strikes
shot.
hit civilian targets.
Bro, that
like a
shit like
school
makes
or a
like
bus
it
station,
makes like
with
blisters
hundreds of
in your lungs and
casualties.
shit.
Civilians on both sides are now caught in the crossfire of this brutally escalating war. Their cities and their homes are not safe, so many flee. These
Damn.
events leave
Bro,
an
war
entire
is so fucked,
generation
I'm not gonna lie.
scarred by the trauma of war and a disdain for the outside powers that have ripped their country apart. And speaking of outside powers, this is when the US starts double dealing. They start selling missiles to
God damn
Iran, which gives
Hey.
Iran an edge against
A
Iraqi
bag is a
forces,
bag.
who the US is also supporting. Behind all this is President Ronald Reagan, who wants to
Good
use
old
the money
Reagan, yeah.
from this deal to fund an anti-communist militia group in Nicaragua. It's all supposed to be a secret, but will eventually come out and be known as the Iran-Contra scandal.
It's gay?
Meanwhile,
I had no idea.
Kuwait is asking the U.S. to be more aggressive to protect their oil tankers. Iranian attacks on their ships have started to take a toll. The U.S. is getting more involved in the war.
Now
Their
we're
presence in
ego
the Persian
swinging,
Gulf
man.
is growing. They start putting American flags on Kuwaiti tankers to deter Iran from attacking them. And then in March of 1988, Iran partners with the Kurdish fighters to take over the Iraqi town
Good
of
old
Halabja.
Kurds.
The Kurds know that this is going to set Saddam off, and they brace themselves for a brutal retaliation. But what comes next is worse than anyone could have prepared for.
I think I need to go.
The Iraqi army drops
I'm gonna get off
bombs
after
and
this video.
artillery shells containing deadly chemicals, blanketing the entire town with a cloud of deadly gas that sinks into
Okay,
homes,
dude,
and
Jesus
buildings,
Christ.
and the
Go to
underground
bed.
shelters where many are fighting for
I
protection.
need to make food. I need to
It's a
food prep
brutal
and stuff for this
attack
week.
that kills over 5,000
I'll probably
Iraqi
sleep at like
Kurds,
9
mostly
a.m. maybe.
unarmed civilians.
Like that.
And it was a part of a broader campaign that Saddam was now
Nah,
waging
gas
to
is
wipe
fucked, bro.
out the Kurdish people.
So are drones.
entirely.
Drone
He
warfare
now
is
had
cooked
what he
too.
believed was a justification. So the Iraqi army starts going village to village.
I'm gonna make him
dropping
make some
chemical weapons on
stir fry, probably.
civilians and executing any survivors.
Cereal.
This resulted
I can
in
cook
an
pretty good.
estimated 50 to 100,000 deaths in what has now been deemed as a genocide, one of the many war crimes
Yeah, it's gonna be
committed
bussin'.
by Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, I get the walkout.
The US knows this is happening, and yet, according to now public documents, the official government line was to turn
Email
a
me
blind
some.
eye to blame everything on Iran.
Email is crazy.
Saddam's horrific war crimes project a new fear onto the civilians in Iran who now worry that a missile loaded with deadly gas could land
Don't
on
worry.
their cities. Many flee to take shelter in the mountains. And by now,
Damn.
after 8 years of
It's crazy that,
devastating
like,
war,
this
Iran's
could literally
economy
be your
and
life
social
if you weren't,
order is
like,
frayed.
if you were
Their
just
leader,
born
Ayatollah
just a
Khomeini,
couple
is
thousand
feeling
miles
the pressure
over.
to end
This is
war.
literally you. That's wild.
More than 1 million lives have been lost in this war. All sides are looking for a way out, and the UN Security Council is pressuring the parties to accept a ceasefire. Then, in July of 1988, a US ship in the Persian Gulf shoots down an Iranian passenger jet.
But why?
And all 290 civilians on board.
Seville.
The US shakes it off as an unfortunate accident, saying that they mistook the airliner for a hostile
Unfortunate
F-16 fighter jet. They
Man,
pay
that's some
compensation
US
to the
for you
victims'
right there,
families,
really.
And President Reagan sends a letter apologizing.
Oh my
The
god.
government never
Reagan got
formally
old quick.
apologizes. And the captain of the ship who did this later received a medal.
Apologize?
Which fed a deep
Yeah, my fault,
suspicion
bruh.
in Iran that
Hey,
this
shit.
attack was
It is what it
deliberate,
is.
that it was a scheme to coerce them into accepting peace. Fear of more American attacks, along with a new offensive by Iraq,
my bad,
pushes
dude.
the Iranian forces to withdraw
Twin
from the
Towers
country,
mentioned?
and both
Yeah.
sides finally accept a ceasefire.
Okay.
The war is finally over, and after all of this, the borders were unchanged from before the fighting. But in some ways,
Bro,
this
so
was
you're
really
telling
just
me
the first
thousands of
round in a
people have
larger
died
conflict
for
that has
nothing.
continued
That's
through
just-
to
that's
today,
fantastic,
a war
man.
For the future of the
Thanks,
Middle
bro.
East, one that the United States is
Jesus
deeply
Christ.
involved in, but that most expresses itself as a Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Iran, who now fuel civil wars around the region in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, backing their own proxy fighters
Bro, this is
and
cooked.
making these conflicts worse. But another major takeaway here is that this war defined Iran's
I gotta stop
relationship
chewing
to
my
the
lips,
rest
bro.
of the world, especially the United States. Iranian hardliners came to feel confirmed in their
Hard what?
belief that
Hard
they
what
could never
liners?
trust an outside world bent on Iran's destruction and seemingly
Hard and bent?
unconstrained in their
You just like
violence,
me.
leading some leaders to conclude that only nuclear weapons could stave off disaster from the outside.
Ah, shit.
Saddam Hussein's
And
Iraq
the
emerged
Earth is gonna
battered
give a
by
shit
this
now.
war, humiliated by this failure against Iran. He faced growing internal
Not the
resistance from
nukes.
his people, which he suppressed with more and more violence. He also came out of this with huge war debts to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Angry that
This
his
guy.
allies had billed him to fight a war on their behalf, a few years later, Saddam invades Kuwait, seeking its oil, taking the spoils that
All
he
right.
felt he was owed. And this is when his one-time backer, the United States, quickly turns against him, expelling him from Kuwait,
Okay.
and beating him back in a swift 43-day victory,
WUS?
cutting him off from the world economy, and turning him into a pariah, an enemy. A decade
Into
after
a
Saddam
what?
had
A
gassed his
piranha?
own people, the US finally blamed him for it, turning it into a byword for his cruelty and the centerpiece for their demand that he step down. A few years later, George W. Bush would cite these weapons of mass
The man with a bush.
destructions, the ones that he would never find, as a reason to invade the country, to topple Saddam. Bush's war room was filled with
You think
the
Bush
same
had a bush?
officials who had covered for Saddam
Sorry,
and his
sir.
war crimes in the first place, and making it so crystal clear that even though this war between Iran and Iraq ended decades ago, The Middle East we see today is built off of what happened during those 8 brutal years.
W video? Sheesh.